Welcome once again to The Russell Brown Show. This episode is brought to you by the number 16. Is this going to be the number of mistakes that Mr. Brown is going to make during this presentation? Or is this going to be the number of tips and techniques he's going to demonstrate when using text in Photoshop CS2? Yes, it's the tips and techniques. In this first of these 16 tips and techniques, I'm going to demonstrate how to quickly and easily change the font for a particular selected layer of text. Why, how is he doing this? He's cycling through all of the different typefaces in his current system. Why, this is amazing. I would like to know how to do this. Well, simply and easily target your layer. Turn on the layer visibility here, and of course you have your text tool selected. Do not select the text itself. Merely select the name of the text found here in the options bar. If I click once, the text name is selected. Then I move to my keyboard. I select my down or up arrow. It will then quickly and easily cycle through all of the typefaces built into my system. Why, this is an amazing capability that every graphic designer should know. I'm now going to select the up arrow and go backwards. Why, that's incredible. So, we have the ability to adjust this text easily and quickly. That was tip and technique number 1. Now, how could I apply this to multiple layers of text? In this case, I'm going to turn on the visibility of 2 additional layers, as you see here in the Layers palette. Then I'm going to hold down my Shift key and select these layers so they're all grouped together temporarily as a single selected group. Okay, now I go up to my options bar and select my flyout arrow here for text, and I can now choose a different typeface, and it changes the typeface for all 3 of the selected layers. Why, that was tip number 2, changing multiple selected layers at one time. Tip number 3. In this tip, we're going to create some text, and we'll have the ability to adjust its size while we're creating it. You don't believe me? Let's give this a try. So now I'm selecting my text tool. I'm going to click into my work area here and type in some text. Why, was that mistake number 1? Perhaps it was. Now, we have a layer of text, but we want to keep this active and continue typing, but still move it. So we hold down the Command key on the Macintosh or the Control key on the PC, and the control arms appear around the corners of this text. We can now move it by clicking here in the middle, just like that. But we can also scale it by moving our cursor to the corner, clicking, then selecting the Shift key, of course, to constrain this so it looks like this. Amazing, but true. And then, of course, we can continue to type more text. So that was, of course, tip number 3, creating text and keeping it active while we're working on it. Okay, I think we're ready for tip number 4, setting the font preview. As you saw earlier, when I click here on the flyout arrow from the options bar, I do not see a preview of the particular font I've selected. To turn that on, we're going over here to Photoshop, Preferences, and down to Type, right there. And we're going to click here, Font Preview. I'm going to select Large and click OK. Now, when I click on the flyout arrow, I get the preview of each one of these typefaces that I'd like to select. So that was, of course, tip number 4, setting the font preview. We're ready for tip number 5. Ah, yes, selecting text. If I turn on a few of these layers right now, right over here, just like this, and I want to target one of these and change it or type in something new, all I do is click here. In this case, on layer number 2 right here, I'm going to double click on the icon. It then highlights that area because it's completely selected. This would be the same for point text as well as paragraph text. Now I can just type in a new word right in there, just like that. So it's a great way to select a group of text easily and quickly. Let me repeat that, double clicking right on the icon, highlights the layer just like that. That, of course, was tip number 5, double-clicking on the text. Tip number 6, text presets. Ah, yes, text presets. Up here in the left-hand corner of your screen, notice this pop-out arrow right here. I can then address all of the existing presets that I have set up for my text tool. Now, I set these up earlier, and you just have to click on them, and then once you've selected that, you're then typing in Myriad Pro Regular 24 point. To create one of these, you merely change your font size, for example, your orientation of your text here. In this case, I'm setting it for centered text. And over here, you might change the font, just like that. Then you can go back over here to the corner, the flyout arrow, and then select this flyout arrow and select New Tool Preset. Notice that it shows the orientation, the typeface, and its current point size. You can leave that name or change the name to something you like, click OK, and you now have a new preset. So don't forget that. That was tip and technique number 6, text presets. Number 7, setting a new line of text. Now, what if you're working in a situation like this where you have multiple layers of text and you want to add a new layer of text? But when you click with the text tool, you always seem to select text that's already there. The answer to this is to hold down the Shift key whenever you want to create a new line of text. It then ignores all the other text which might exist around it or near it. So now you have a new line of text that you can put onto your screen. Of course, that was tip number 7, setting a new line of text when there's a lot of text all around. Tip number 8, warping text. Okay, it just so happens that I have a nice layer of text here for warping right there. Let's target this. We all know that you've had the ability to warp text inside of Photoshop for quite a while. But here inside of Photoshop CS2, I'm moving up here to the options bar and clicking on Create Warped Text. I then receive the Warp Text dialog as you see here. I can go through and select some of the defaults as you see here and even adjust those defaults right here. But we want more than this. We want the ability to get right in there and warp this text like you can warp an image. Let's cancel from that. Let's target our text and let's turn our text into a smart object. Going out here to the flyout arrow, here from within the Layers palette, I'm going to select Group into Smart Object right there. Now I can go back in and transform this and warp it and actually go right into the letter forms and warp them around just like this. That's the type of real warping I wanted to work with in this project. But wait, this particular technique will distort the edges of the text because we are warping a bitmap representation of this text. We want better than this. So I'm going to undo this and show you another technique for warping text with more accuracy. I'm going to move back here in time until we just have our warped text and it's still editable as you see here. What I first want to do is go up here to Layer, down to Type, and over to Convert to Shape. By converting this to a shape, it then represents the text with Bezier curves. Now, if I transform this, and in fact warp it, I can warp it with much more accuracy. Let's really warp this out so you can see what's happening. And if I click here to zoom in on this, you can see I'm warping the Bezier curve, which is then defining the text at the current resolution of my image. So I'm not getting any soft edges when I warp this. So once again, you just saw warping text with an added bonus feature of showing you how to warp text with more accuracy. Okay, let's move forward. Let's hit our Enter key and move forward with tip number 9. Let's go back in time here till our text is just standard text, in this case for the word warp. And I want to turn this standard text into a selection which I might want to paint into. To do this, move your cursor over the targeted layer, as you see here. then hold down the Command key on the Macintosh or the Control key on the PC, and the icon changes. Click on that layer, and it turns it into a selection. Then you can turn off that layer, target a layer that you can paint into, in this case my background layer, and in this case I'm going to select a brush here from my tool palette, and I'm going to paint into this text that I currently have selected. Now I'm going to hide these current edges by going under View and down to Extras and click right on that so it's hidden. So now if I go through and paint with my paintbrush, look at the effects I can achieve. I can start to paint into the selected area that the text was in and use it as a mask for painting. So of course that was tip number 9, painting into a selected text region. We are now ready for using text with a shape. Now let's go over here to my tool palette, and here I've selected the custom shape tool. Then if I go up here to my options bar, you can see that I can select a custom shape. Let's select this heart shape, and then I move over here in my options bar and I make sure that I have the paths tool selected. With the paths tool selected, I can click and drag and create a heart shape just like that. Then going back to my text tool, here in my tool palette, I can select the text tool and start to type. But let's use one of those presets that I created earlier. I have a Myriad Pro regular preset that I'm going to select, and that sets up everything for me. And now what I do is click inside of a custom shape and wait for the icon to change, and then I can start to type some text just like this. And in fact, let's select all of that, copy it, and paste it multiple times so we can see how it fills up this space, just like that. And for bonus points, don't forget, here I've selected the Direct Select tool from my set of tools over here. And of course, the Direct Select tool can be selected by clicking and holding on the Path Selection tool, the solid arrow, to select the Direct Selection tool. Then you can go in and target specific points on this path that you've just created, and of course by adjusting these points you can adjust the wrap of this text. So that was tip and technique number 10, working with shapes, layers, and placing text inside of the shape. We're now ready for tip number 11, letter spacing with the arrow keys. Yes, indeed, letter spacing with the arrow keys. Let's turn this off and turn back on one of our previous layers here. Move this down into position. And let's talk about tracking and kerning and changing the font size, but the easy way. Selecting my text tool, then moving up here to my options bar, I'm going to reveal the character and paragraph palettes, as you see here. Now, what if I can't remember all those fancy keyboard shortcuts for adjusting the font size, the kerning, and the leading, but I want to be able to adjust these visually and quickly? Here it is. I'm going to place my cursor into this line of text. Then I'm going to move into my character palette, as you see here, and click here on this icon, which then highlights my kerning for that particular pair. All I do now is use my arrow keys. I'm using the up arrow key to increase this and the down arrow key. This, of course, is changing this in increments of 10. You can increase this increment adjustment by holding down the Shift key to get a greater and more extreme adjustment when using the up and down arrow keys. As you see here, I'm holding down the Shift key. And now I'm not holding down the Shift key for more subtle adjustments. This is also true of making adjustments for tracking or leading or even font size. Let's try font size. I'm double clicking on that to select it, targeting my font size, and then of course I can change the font size up and down with the up and down arrows. Of course, that was setting the letter spacing and adjusting the size using the arrow keys, tip number 11. We're now ready for tip number 12, using the glyph palette. Now, wait a minute. There's no glyph palette inside of Photoshop, but there is one inside of Adobe Illustrator. Let me demonstrate. Let's turn off this layer and turn on our glyph layer here. Here we have a great setting of a font called Bickham Script Pro. Now this particular font has a great selection of glyphs. We're going to access those from Adobe Illustrator. Now the best way to do this is to actually place our cursor right into the text like this, select all of the text, and then copy the text. Now what we want to do is simply switch over to Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to open up Illustrator right here. Then I'm going to paste this set of text in. And of course, since Illustrator and Photoshop use the same text engine, which really means they produce and create text in the same way, I can then paste it back and forth between the two. But here's the advantage. Inside of Illustrator, I can go to my window menu and down to Type and over to Glyphs to reveal my Glyphs palette. Here you can see I'm displaying the entire library of glyphs available for this particular typeface. But I want to narrow this down to just the alternates for the current selection right there. So now I can go back in here to my typeface and click and drag through one of the letters, the letter Y, and then I can go through and choose from this library of characters or glyphs to change this. How did I do that? I just double click on the glyph that I would like to try in this configuration. Why, that's amazing. Let's check this one out. Check this one out. But I think I like this one right here. I choose the glyph I like. In this case, I'm just going to change the letter Y. I could go through and select some of the others and adjust those as well, but this looks great. I've made a simple and easy adjustment inside of Illustrator. Then I go back, select all my text, copy it once again, and let's go back to Adobe Photoshop. Our text is still selected. I should be able to paste the new text into position, and I now have that glyph in position just like it was in Illustrator. So that was tip number 12, working with the glyph palette from Adobe Illustrator. We're now ready for tip number 13, selective color changes. Why, check this out. I can select that letter Y that we created earlier and go up here to the options bar, click on this small color tab, and reveal the color picker window, which I can go in and adjust and select a color for that specific glyph within this word. Now you're saying, I knew that, Russ. I knew that. Some of you didn't know this. I know it. I click OK. That, of course, was selective color changes. Tip number 13, and of course you can change the color or even the font for a particular occurrence of a letter within this set. Okay, now on with our story. Tip number 14, quick text orientation changes. Okay, let's take a look at that number 1 again, turn that layer off, and move this into position. Just something you should know when working with text. Currently, we're looking at a horizontal text configuration. Did you know that this icon right here can quickly change your horizontal to a vertical? In this case, I can quickly switch that, and I now have one running down instead of horizontal. Again, that was this icon right up here in the options bar when selecting the text tool. Tip number 14, quick text orientation changes. We're getting closer. We're now on tip number 15, text justification. What does Mr. Brown know about this? I'm going to turn on my justification layer. You'll notice that this particular setting of text is constrained within a bounding box. I created this bounding box by clicking and dragging with the text tool, which then defined the space. Then I typed into the box. I would like to justify this text within this space with a bit of creative control. I'm going to first select all of the text, just like this. Then going up here to the options bar, I'm going to reveal the character and paragraph palettes again. I want to deal with paragraph, and I would like to justify my text. I'm going to click on this icon right here. That's not exactly what I'm looking for. I want something better than this. I'm going to click on the flyout arrow here from the paragraph palette and select justification. Did you know you can adjust the minimum glyph scaling down to 50%? That's the minimum you can adjust it to. And you can adjust the maximum value for glyph scaling to 200%. And then you click OK. So now you can see my word here on the top, the word text, is stretching and distorting to match the bounding box width, whereas the word justification is squeezing so that it fits within the bounding box as well. It's changing each of these text lines so that it fits within the defined area. Of course, there's a carriage return after the word text, so that puts justification on its own line and it makes it fit within its own space. So there it was, text justification creativity when working with glyph adjustments. That was tip number 15. Okay, it's time. Yes, it's time for the 16th tip and technique when working with text. And it better be good. Here it is. I'm going to turn on this layer that you see here. I'm then going to double click here in this blue empty space next to the word 3. Right there. Which will reveal my layer style dialog. I'm going to, of course, select drop shadow here, move this down like this, and adjust the opacity like this, and click OK. Now the trick is, I want to separate the drop shadow from the text for special effects reasons. I might want to split these apart. To do that, go up to the Layer menu, down here to Layer Style, and then down here to Create Layer. It's that simple. It doesn't change on the screen. That's good. But it did change over here in the Layers palette. We now have separated the two. Here, I've turned the visibility off for this layer and back on again. And as you can see with my Move tool, I can move it separately or work on it or add special effects to each of these separately. You've just seen 16 of my favorite text tips and techniques when working in Adobe Photoshop CS2.